one.
I think I may have already told you a little about my family, but we grew up in Alabama. I was 12, almost 13 when I moved to Tennessee, but I've been a Tennessean well over 60 years, so I think I'm a Tennessean. My dad was a Baptist preacher, and we moved every few years, and as preachers do, but we lived at Portersville, Alabama. We lived in a large house there. We didn't even ever use all of the space in the house. Even though we had a large family, we just didn't need all of it. My dad was also a gospel singer and wrote songs, some, and he had a few songs published. He was affiliated with Stamps Baxter, and they were headquartered in Chattanooga at that time, Stamps Baxter Publishing Company, and it was one of the biggest in the music business back in those days. They had a lot of well-known songwriters. If you get an old Stamps Baxter book and look through it at the authors of the songs, I saw most of those people when I was a child because they would have singing schools in the summer and the afternoon. The Stamps Baxter bunch would get a lot of their well-known songwriters together, and they would come, and like in the case when they would come down to our area, Dad would secure a church for them to do a singing school in the afternoon. After the singing school was over, they would all come back by the house. Our house had a large porch on it. I don't remember, I think it was 12 feet wide out from the house, and it went halfway around the house. Had gone all the way around, but I guess at some point in time they had torn down part of it. But we had a lot of rocking chairs. It didn't look as neat as Cracker Barrel because our chairs didn't all match, but we had lots of big rocking chairs on the front porch. And this afternoon, my mother always looked forward to that day because she sat in on Saturday and she baked cookies all day long. On Sunday, while they were going to the singing school, we had to draw water. She had frozen ice in the refrigerator. We did have an electric refrigerator, but she had frozen ice in every container she could get, and she made a tub full of lemonade. I don't remember how many pounds of sugar she had to put in it and how many dozen lemons, but she made a wash tub full of lemonade. So all afternoon after they came back from the singing school, they would sit around, eat cookies, and drink lemonade. This was a big day for them. That Sunday, there was several of the well-known songwriters was there, and always the Stampses and Baxters. That was two families. There was two Stamps brothers, Frank and Virgil, and Mrs. Baxter, the elderly Miss Baxter, they called Ma Baxter, her and her husband. He was J.R. Baxter Sr. Their son, J.R. Baxter Jr., was a well-known singer and piano player. And they would all always be there, and whatever well-known songwriters they could pick up too. Well, this afternoon there was a crowd there. J.R. Baxter Jr. was probably in his 40s, but he had married late, had a young wife and two small children. The children were tired, so Mama had spread a quilt on the floor, and Miss Ann Baxter, J.R. Jr.'s wife, and those children were sitting on the floor. And on his quilt, the children had stretched out kind of. Okay, my oldest brother, Bob, wore an artificial leg. He was wounded in World War II, and he had an artificial leg. Well, he was quite a heavy guy. He weighed up close to 300 pounds. The legs were not as good then as they are now, and oftentimes he would break one, especially he'd break the foot off of it. And they didn't want to repair them. It was cheaper just to make another one. He was a disabled veteran. He could go to Birmingham anytime he wanted to, and they would make him another leg. Well, he always had two or three that had broke that he might need spare parts off of in the closet in his bedroom. I had a little red wagon, and I hauled in wood in my little red wagon. We had a ramp up to the back porch where Jim would push and I would pull, and we would get the wagon up the ramp and roll it right on in by the firebox and put our wood in it and go back and get another load. And it worked real well for us. Well, this afternoon, here's the crowd out there. Every chair is full. They're all having big stamp. Well, the day before, there had been a really, really terrible wreck right down at the corner of our property. Highway 11 went in front of our house. It was a long way from our house down to the highway. We set up on a hill, but there'd been a terrible wreck. I think 3 people were killed in the wreck. It was horrible. We didn't get to go down there, but we heard a lot of talk about it, that there was dismemberment. It was very horrible. 3 cars involved. Well, they were all talking about the wreck, and Daddy was in the know, of course. Right down yonder, if you see that fence post there in the corner, right over the hill there, right there, one of the cars came up on that bank, and you know, he knew all about it. He was very much in the know. Well, I get an inspiration, very dangerous. A 6-year-old does not need to get an inspiration. I go back into the back part of the house, and I go out and I get my red wagon and I pull it up the ramp, and I go into Bob's bedroom. I get one of his old wooden legs and I lay it in my wagon. Mama never threw away anything. Honestly, she never threw away anything. Bed sheets would get into the place where the holes came in them. She would usually cut them in 2 for some reason and fold them up and save them for cleaning rags or for whatever we needed. I go and get one of those half of the sheets and I wrap it around that leg. I'm gonna put some ketchup on it, but I don't find any ketchup. But there is a quart jar with about so much tomato juice in it. So I pour that around over it real good. I go back out onto the back porch. I go all the way around and I come right up into the middle of them, and they're all still talking about the wreck. And I say, hey, look what I found down there where they had that wreck. You talk about pandemonium. There were people running for the railing and literally losing their cookies everywhere. Some made it to the railing, some didn't. Miss Ann Baxter had just gotten up off the pallet and sat in the rocking chair. She fainted dead out. She fell face first onto the floor. She broke her little fancy butterfly glasses. She also broke her nose. It turned out a lot bigger than I really meant for it to. Well, my daddy was not nearly as tall as I am. He was about 5'6", but he was as big around as anybody in the country. Weighed about 240. He always wore a wide belt similar to what I wear. He stood up and he grabbed me by the arm and he popped a buckle on that belt and he come out with it. Now, some of you will not remember this, but when I was a child, my brother would take us to the drive-in theater. There was a Western star in those days named Lash LaRue. He did not carry a gun. He did not carry a knife. He carried a bullwhip, and he was quite skilled with it. And my daddy come out with that belt and he jerked it so that it came all the way out of those belt loops and come way back here. And I don't know if it actually popped when it went back there or not, but it reminded me of Lash LaRue when he would pop that whip. And here he come with it. I have never had such a beating in all my life. He just kept on. I realized years later this was the beginning of my dad's heart trouble. He had serious heart problems, eventually died from it. But he whipped me till he was just panting for breath. Frank Stamps was the bass singer in the Stamps-Baxter Quartet, part owner of the company too. He was sitting there, kind of dodging the belt as it come around. He had a deep voice. He was a bass singer. He said, Sam, you're gonna kill that boy. Daddy said, I don't know if I'm gonna hold out or not, but I'm gonna try. Well, I've never had a whipping in all my life like that, but there is an aftermath to the story. Many years later, my brother Jim was also a preacher, and he lived probably 2 counties away from there. But he told me, he said, there's a Saturday night singing up at Chevy's. Well, I knew where Chevy's was. It wasn't too far from where we lived there at Portersville, maybe 5 or 6 miles over on the edge of Sand Mountain. He said, there's a gospel singing over there at Chevy's, and it's been put on by Stamps-Baxter. He said, you want to go? I said, yeah, let's go. Well, we get there, and they do have some good singers, and we enjoyed it. But long in the evening, gentleman who's the MC for everything gets up and says, we have a kind of a dignitary with us tonight. Said most of the Stamps-Baxter people that were famous back in the 40s and 50s have gone on. Miss Ann Baxter still survives. She's the widow of J.R. Baxter Jr. She's here with us tonight, and we'd like for her to come up and say a few words if she would. Yep, there she was. She gets up there, little short lady, not pretty at all, she never was, with a little crooked nose. I knew where she got that crooked nose, so I did not go around and introduce myself to Miss Ann Baxter. But I know that in the 80s she was still surviving from the fall she had there at home. And that's my story about the wooden leg incident.